Sometimes when it comes to games and entertainment, I do like getting out of my comfort zone. Not just in trying genres I usually wouldn't play, but also going a little outside of what my age demographic can be. There's always something fun into checking out what you would have probably loved when you were a lot younger. This goes with the caveat that, since I am getting older, I might not enjoy some of these games and media due to my own age and where I am mentally. A bit of a sad reality, but sometimes you can be a bit too old for some things. And that is what takes us to Gurumin. Now, I wasn't really planning to review this game, mainly because I was looking to play something shorter so I could wind down from spending the first quarter of 2022 playing nothing but very long open world games. But something about this game caught my eye as I was playing it thanks to a friend's recommendation, and what I saw was interesting. Very unremarkable, but interesting nonetheless. In Gurumin, we play as Parin, a little girl that just moved to Thais town. Her parents are on a business trip, so she has to stay with her grandfather. Just as she learns there's no other kids in the town, she meets a monster girl who invites her into her monster world, and thus she's not bored no more. That is, until some villains attack and destroy Monster Village, so now it's up to Parin to help restore it. And that's about it for the plot really. If I am to compare the story of this game with something, it will be with a Saturday morning cartoon, the kind that leans heavily towards a very young audience, and as a result it can be very kiddie, but more on that later. Gameplay wise, this game is a bit of a hack and slash game slash platformer. You wield the drill as your only weapon, and you can unlock hacks that will give you an edge against the environment or your enemies. It's very simplistic, but I actually had a lot of fun with it, which is why I was able to enjoy it and play it through to the end. There's not too many complexities to the combat or the level design, so the exploration is nice and simple enough to keep you entertained. Fighting enemies is nothing out of the ordinary, but it does bring something extra satisfying anytime you start landing combos on them. This is especially true in later levels when you get segments where you face off against entire little crowds. It simply feels good to load out your better attacks and just wipe the floor with these guys. This is pretty well paced with the exploration and the platforming. You get to explore around after beating up enemies for the right amount of time. Then you get to go on to do some puzzle solving or some good old-fashioned platforming. Nothing really overstays its welcome too long, which is great because the game can get very repetitive otherwise. As you move through the storyline, you also get to participate in a couple of mini-games. Some of them are good, some others a bit questionable, but they did do a good job at shaking things up, but they don't really compare to some of the stuff I really enjoyed, and that is of course the boss fights. True to the classic 3D platforming inspirations it has, at the end of any major area you are going to fight a boss. Every boss has their own theming and combat style, and the challenge is adapting and overcoming each arena. And unlike the regular enemies who can be quite pathetic on their own, the bosses present a really good challenge. None of them really feel like a difficulty spike, unless you are on low on healing items. Now, why are you doing a lot of this stuff? How are we restoring Monster Village? Well, we are restoring it by returning its furniture to its owners. In a very fun twist to the whole save the world thing and the typical fetch quest, Monster World's existence is emotion-based. If the monsters are feeling good and happy, the world expands. But if they are feeling unwell or upset or very sad, the world gets covered in a thick fog. So every time you are refurbishing and restoring someone's home, you are slowly healing the world itself, and it can be pretty fulfilling. But not everything is good in this game. Like I said in the beginning, it's an interesting game, but it is also a very unremarkable one. This game was made on a low budget by a small indie team, and it really shows. Everything is very simplistic, and I'm going to assume it's because this is supposed to be simple enough for a little kid to beat. The story, while very interesting, is also very spotty along with the voice acting. After you are introduced to Monster Village and once the main quest begins, you see the main character talk to everyone like she already knows them. The problem is the transition between her introduction to these monsters and the friendship that gets established with them is basically non-existent. So her suddenly calling every new character you meet by name becomes a little jarring. The other low-budget elements of the game also show because the levels themselves are not exactly long. This game could be easily completed in 5 to 6 hours tops, in theory at least, because in practice, this game commits one of the most obnoxious sins a game can make for its main story, and that is padding. Segments of the story and other levels that should be completed in a decent amount of time get stretched out thin. Your quest can sometimes go into 3 different tangents, a minigame, and some bizarre requirements before you even get to move on to the next major story segment. Remember how I said you can restore Monster Village and remove the fog by bringing furniture back to its inhabitants? Some stretches of land are blocked off completely unless you complete some of the optional levels, which will be okay in itself, except the optional levels are just the main levels, except you do them in reverse. They are supposed to be harder too, but again, challenging is one of the things this game is not. I really started liking this game, but the way it stretched itself into 10 hours had me mentally checked out by the time I reached the final boss. It was made worse by the fact I had to grind to get some money so I could replenish all my healing items, because I had spent it all in upgrading some of my stuff. Which, by the way, I found very funny, because as I was playing this game, I couldn't help but think of another game that was also about some kid getting to explore another world and helping people out during their journey. Something Wonderland. I thought it was funny because in concept and execution, this game did a much better job at it without downright patronizing the player in hopes of making things so simple even a baby could do it. In spite of its flaws, I thought this was an okay game. The one thing that really struck me and got me to stay with it until the very end is that it reminds me a lot of the 6th generation days with the PlayStation 2, before YouTube became more commonplace and finding something new was a matter of taking risks and surprising yourself, rather than relying on reviews or other word of mouth. I don't want to go too hard on the negatives, because I want to chalk it up more to me growing older. Some of the things in this game will just not click with me no more, so I'm going to give this game some well-deserved courtesy and give it a 7 out of 10. I don't plan to replay it anytime soon as the fun factor ran its course, also because the keyboard controls are pretty bad, but it's a tolerable side of jank, so at least I got to have my fun with it. With everything said and done, I don't regret getting into this game. If anything, it makes me want to keep exploring my backlog to see what kind of obscure little gems are in there. Because that is always the fun part of giving obscure games a chance. You never know when you're gonna find something good, and in some unique cases, you can find some real underrated classics.